Before we begin, I want you to imagine something simple. You're in the middle of a prayer, a personal, intimate prayer, and suddenly you get stuck. A word won't come out. Your concentration breaks. Something is interrupted. Have you ever wondered what that moment means? Is it just a mechanical failure, or is it a message? In the world of our sages, nothing is accidental. Every detail, every gesture, every silence can be transformed into a siman, a sign. Not a cheap superstition, not a magical prediction, but a window, a hidden indication of your own spiritual state, a mirror. Today we are going to delve into one of the most fascinating and least understood topics in Jewish thought, simanim. What are they? How do they work? Why does the Mishnah dare to say that a mistake in prayer is a bad sign? What did Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa perceive at the exact moment when his words flowed or were blocked? How do we know when a sign is a spiritual tool and when it is forbidden superstition? And if you think this is abstract, let me tell you something. Everyone uses simanim. Everyone. When you choose how to start a year, when you perform a symbolic act, when an inner feeling tells you this is right or this is wrong, we do it without realizing it. The question is not whether simanim exist. The question is, do we know how to read them? In the next few minutes, we are going to open texts from the Mishnah, Talmud, Midrash, and Kabbalah, and I promise you that, when we finish, you will not only understand what simanim are, you will begin to see them. In your habits, in your decisions, in your tefillah, in your silences. I'm not exaggerating. After this class, you won't be able to ignore some things anymore. If you're ready, let's enter together into the secret language of signs. My name is Abel Flores, and I am very grateful that you are here with us on Mishna TV, your channel, dedicating time to study with us on all these topics that seek to instruct you and elevate your spirituality. Make yourself comfortable, because we are about to begin. So, the teaching we are dealing with in this class is located in Berakhot, chapter 5, Mishnah 5, and it reads as follows. Whoever is praying and errs, it is a bad omen, siman ra for him. And if he is the emissary of the congregation, Shaliach Tzibur, it is a bad omen for those who sent him, for a person's emissary is like the person himself. They said about Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa that when he prayed for the sick, he would say, this one will live, and this one will die. They asked him, how do you know? He replied, if my prayer flows naturally in my mouth, im shagura tefilati befi, I know it is accepted, but if not, I know it is rejected. By the way, you should know that this Mishnah closes the section in Berakhot that deals with concentration, namely kavanah, the inner disposition, and with the correctness of the text in prayer, that is, the text of the Tzibur or prayer book. Sometimes, when we open a text of the Mishnah, we feel as though we enter a space where the technical and the spiritual are woven together like fibers of the same thread. And chapter 5 of Berakhot is a perfect example of that blend. It begins by teaching us how to pray, and ends by teaching us how to read the soul while we pray. That is no small matter. The Mishnah speaks of bodily posture, of the structure of the Amidah, but it also speaks of omens, of inner connection, and of the mysterious relationship between fluency and divine acceptance. It is almost like moving from the engineering of prayer to its deep psychology. Imagine the sages nearly 2,000 years ago. For them, prayer was not a mechanical activity squeezed between meetings. It was an existential act. That is why chapter 5 opens with a demand that today seems almost extraterrestrial. You cannot pray without koved rosh, without a weight upon the head, a serious, almost grave sense of inward focus. And then come the ancient Hasidim, those early masters of devotion, who would spend an hour, a full hour, preparing their hearts, an hour to align the soul with the eternal. Today, if it takes us more than 30 seconds to concentrate, we already feel the universe conspires against us. For them, preparation was an essential part of tefillah. The following Mishnayot, 5.2 through 5.4, become surgical. Where to insert the mention of rain, where to place havdalah, what to do if you make a critical mistake in a blessing. It is pure anatomy. Precision. The Amidah is a spiritual architecture, and if you remove a stone from its arch in the wrong place, the whole structure collapses. Up to this point, everything unfolds in halakhic territory. But our Mishnah 5.5 dares to cross a boundary. It no longer speaks only of technique. It speaks of signs, of omens, of the inner reading of the one who prays. It is as if you returned home after a practical class, and suddenly the teacher looked you in the eyes and said, now let us speak about your soul. The opening phrase lands softly. yet with a flawless edge. Whoever prays and errs, it is a bad omen for him. The Hebrew expression hamitbalel veta'ah does not refer to a tiny stumble, a crossed syllable, a small stutter. No, it means an error that interrupts the essence of the prayer, a serious confusion, the kind that forces you to go back, repeat, reorganize. And the bad omen, siman ra, does not mean something terrible will happen to you tomorrow. It is not astrology. The sages are not selling horoscopes outside the Beit Midrash. They are saying something else. Your mistake reveals your inner state. It exposes you. It is a mirror, not a prophecy. Because if, at the most sacred moment of the day, when you stand before the king, your mind wanders, your heart is unsettled, your kavanah evaporates, then the mistake is a sign of precisely that. The bad sign describes your concentration, not your future. It tells you, my friend, perhaps you need to work on presence, attention, reverence. And the Mishnah does not stop there. It goes deeper. Because if the one who errs is the Shaliach Tzibur, the emissary of the community, then it says, the bad omen concerns those who sent him. For shlucho shel adam kemoto, a person's emissary is like the person himself. In antiquity, most people could not recite the entire Amidah, so they appointed someone to do it for them. That person was not a liturgical performer. He was their voice, their spiritual representative. Thus, if he fails, the community fails. If he loses kavanah, the community is left exposed. In a single line, the Mishnah constructs the theory of liturgical leadership. The one who speaks on behalf of the people must be prepared, worthy, with life, mind, and heart aligned. It is not an ornamental role, it is a sacred one. And then, in a delightful transition, the Mishnah gives us a story. Because the rabbis knew that an idea without an example floats in the air like incense without an altar. So Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa appears, and if there is a figure who embodies living mysticism, it is him. Poor to the point of misery, humble as dust, yet with an intimacy with God that defies all logic. His prayers stopped storms, made vinegar burn, healed the sick. When others prayed, they requested. When he prayed, he connected. It is different. The Mishnah recalls that when people asked him to pray for a sick person, he would say, this one will live, this one will die. And one can almost imagine the scene, people watching in fear, waiting for the tzaddik's answer. But he himself clarified his criterion, and here lies the jewel of the passage. If my prayer flows naturally in my mouth, I know it is accepted. If it does not flow, I know it is not. Im shegura tefilati befi. What a profound expression. Shegura, loose, fluid, like water running downhill without obstacles. In some manuscript variants, they even say shagra, flowing with strength, with force. For Rabbi Hanina, prayer was a spiritual seismograph. If the soul was aligned, the prayer ran on its own. If it was not, the words became blocked, as if the universe were saying to him, no, my friend, not today. And so if we look at the entire 5th chapter together, the message is coherent and beautiful. Tefillah, to be authentic, requires kavanah, presence, attention, focus. Serious errors reveal a lack of that kavanah. When they happen to an individual, they affect that individual. When they happen to a public representative, they affect the entire community. And Rabbi Hanina shows the opposite extreme. Someone whose inner connection is so pure that he can sense divine acceptance not through external miracles, but through the very fluency of his own words. The classical commentators understood it this way. Rambam, with his rationalistic elegance, explains that this is not about superstition, but about spiritual pedagogy. The error does not predict misfortune, it reveals deficiencies in concentration. And in his legal code, he does not obligate anyone to be distressed over slips, but he does insist on the dignity and preparation required for the act of praying. Bartanura, closer to the language of the Talmud, notes that the bad omen indicates that the prayer was not fully received. And concerning the Shaliach Tzibur, he highlights something essential. The community is responsible for the one who represents it. The emissary's mistake is a reflection of those who sent him. And then again, Hanina, the man whose wife lit vinegar as if it were oil, whose merit sustained the world. He represents the luminous limit, when tefillah is not merely reciting, but resonating. Now then, it is equally important to see what the Mishnah does not say. It does not legitimize superstitions. It does not say that if you make a mistake, catastrophe awaits you. It does not use the language of ill omens in the pagan sense. It does not ask you to obsess over every slip. It does not turn prayer into a spiritual anxiety test. Nor does it authorize anyone to predict life or death. Rabbi Hanina is an extreme, unique case, revered for his holiness, not a standard for imitation. What it does say is more human and deeper. Prayer is a mirror of the soul. And what happens while you pray? Errors, doubts, fluency, blocks can tell you more about your inner state than about your external destiny. It teaches the responsibility of leadership. If you speak for many, you must live for many. And it invites you to listen to the quality of your own prayer. Is it a living river or a rusty pipe? Today in our modern lives, this message is surprisingly relevant because we still pray, or meditate, or contemplate, or reflect amid constant distractions. If you make a mistake while praying, do not be frightened. Ask yourself what that error reveals. Are you tired? Are you empty? Are you absent from yourself? If you lead a public prayer in a synagogue, in a community, even in a family gathering, remember that your role is not ornamental. You are the voice and the heart of the collective. That requires integrity, preparation, and humility. And if you have ever felt that your prayer flows, or on the contrary, that it is blocked, there you have an inner compass, not to predict outcomes, but to understand where you stand spiritually. In the end, the Mishna leaves us with two questions that travel across the centuries, like soft but precise arrows. How do I pray when I pray? Am I truly present or merely repeating words? And the second, even more intimate. What does my prayer tell me about my inner state? Does it flow like a river or stumble like a stone? When you understand those answers, even if you do not know the future, you will have known your soul. And perhaps, just perhaps, you will have taken one more step toward that ancient, luminous experience of truly standing before the King. Now, let's delve into the main topic of this class. What are simanim? There are words that, when you pronounce them in Rabbinic Hebrew, seem to contain an entire world condensed into 3 syllables. Siman. A small term, but with surprising depth. Does it mean mark? Does it mean sign? Does it mean omen? Or perhaps it's a reminder, a clue, a guide. The answer, as is often the case in rabbinic literature, is all of that, and more. Siman, plural simanim, is a multifaceted word. It designates a sign, an indication, an omen, a symptom, even a trick to remember something. It is a mark in the world, but also a mark in consciousness. And with that semantic breadth, it's not surprising that the sages used it in 3 major areas: the legal technical, the spiritual symbolic, and the pedagogical mnemonic. 3 such distinct worlds, and a single word that traverses them all. In the legal field, a siman is almost a police detail. A specific mark that allows one to identify a lost object, a chapter, a section. For the commentators of the Talmud, the siman is the trace that confirms ownership. If someone describes an object with a siman mavhak, a conclusive sign, a precise measurement, a unique mark, they can recover it. If they only remember a vague detail, a generic color, a common feature, it's not enough. Here, the siman is evidence. It is precision. It is the proof that prevents disputes and protects property. In the pedagogical realm, the siman becomes a small coded poem. The sages created mnemonic lists, initial letters, keywords that condensed an entire sequence of opinions or topics. Imagine it like those tricks for remembering musical notes, but applied to the world of the Talmud. And the magic word that introduced it was always the same: siman, a sign not of the future, but of memory. But today, I want to invite you to the third territory, the most delicate one, the one most charged with emotion and spirituality. The world where saman means omen. Yes, an omen. A sign that doesn't point to objects, but to the soul. A sign that doesn't describe possessions, but inner states. And here it is appropriate to pause, because Judaism is extraordinarily careful about the line that separates the spiritual sign from forbidden divination. In fact, the Torah explicitly prohibits nechush, superstitious divination, that attempt to read destiny in arbitrary events, a bird that flies by, an unexpected noise, a trivial coincidence. The book of Deuteronomy says it bluntly: let no one be found among you who practices nechush. And the Talmud, particularly in Hulin 95b, opens fascinating debates about cases in which the sages seem to use signs, but clarifies when that is permitted and when it is not. The classic distinction is elegant and profoundly logical. It is forbidden to take a random event. For example, if a ship passes by today, I will travel. If not, I will stay, as a magical decision. But it is permitted and even valuable to use symbolic signs linked to prayer, teshuvah, repentance, or the fulfillment of a mitzvah, commandment. That is to say, it's not about reading the future in events, but about reading your own spiritual state through your sacred actions. And it is precisely there, on that border between introspection and superstition, that our Mishnah from Berakhot 5:5 appears. A short, brilliant, incisive gem. We're taking advantage of this opportunity to make a brief interruption now that we're halfway through our class, to let you know that if you'd like to make a donation via PayPal, you can do so by scanning the QR code you see on the screen, or by clicking the link in the description of this video. Personally, I, Abel Flores, sincerely thank you for any contribution you can make to keep this project going and allow our free course to reach many more people. Also, remember that you help us a lot if you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this information with people you think might be interested. Thank you very much. Now we continue. The Mishnah says, whoever is praying and makes a mistake, it is a bad sign for him. And if it is the emissary of the congregation, it is a bad sign for those who sent him. The Mishnah is not saying that the mistake foretells illnesses, misfortunes, or tragedies. No, it's not a religious horoscope. It's something much more intimate, much more honest. It's saying, if at the moment of greatest spiritual concentration, the Amidah, you get lost, you get confused, you disrupt the order, that reveals your inner state. It's a sign not of the future, but of the present. A spiritual diagnosis disguised as an omen. And when the one who makes the mistake is the Shaliach Tzibur, the one who prays on behalf of the community, the sign is amplified. Because in rabbinic logic, shluko shel adam kamodo, the emissary is like the one who sends him. The emissary's mistake is a reflection of the community that chose him. In other words, the Mishnah is talking about collective responsibility. If your spiritual representative is not prepared, the sign falls upon everyone. A powerful and necessary teaching. But the Mishnah is not content with theories. It brings onto the scene an extraordinary character, Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, the poor tzaddik, the man whose life is a parade of mystical stories. The rabbi who could stop the rain, ignite vinegar, or heal a sick person with a prayer. When he prayed for someone, he would say, "This one will live, this one will die." And one might think, was he prophesying? Was he divining? But he himself explained his method. And there we find one of the most subtle signs in all of rabbinic literature. If my prayer flows in my mouth, I know that it is accepted. If it does not flow, I know that it is rejected. There you have it. Im shegura tefilati befi. If my prayer is loose, fluid, natural in my mouth, the sign is not outside, it is inside. It's not a dove crossing the sky, nor a mysterious sound in the night. It is the inner experience of prayer, spiritual fluidity, as a sign of attunement with the Creator. And what's fascinating is that this teaching fits perfectly with everything that chapter 5 had been building. That tefillah is an act of absolute presence. That it demands kavanah, concentration, intention. That serious errors reveal a lack of that intention. And that fluidity, the state in which the words flow effortlessly, like running water, is a sign that the heart is aligned. At this point, it's worth remembering the etymology of the term siman, because it further illuminates the Mishnah. The Semitic root smn or sym means to put, to place, to mark. And from there come words like sum and sim, to put, to assign, to designate. In late Aramaic, siman is a mark, a sign, a password. We could almost say it's a footprint. And some scholars even point to a kinship with the Greek terms sima and semeion, sign, indication. This wouldn't be surprising. The Hellenistic and rabbinic worlds were in dialogue more than we usually imagine. But in the living rabbinic tradition, siman ended up meaning something simple and profound, the mark that allows you to interpret a situation, a sign that doesn't always point to the future, but helps you understand the present. And now, let me bring all this to a contemporary reflection, because one might think that simanim are relics of the past, words from an ancient world. But no, we all continue to look for simanim. We all want signs that tell us how we are, where we are, and what is happening in our relationship with the sacred. But the Mishnah teaches us to choose our signs wisely, not to read superstitions into external events, but to read the inner quality of our sacred acts. If your prayer falters, Ask yourself why. If it flows, listen to that fluidity. If you make a mistake, don't punish yourself. Understand what that says about your inner state. If you represent others, assume responsibility with humility. Because the true simanim, the signs that matter, are not red or green lights in the sky. They are the marks that prayer leaves on the heart. They are the small clues that the Mishna invites us to read in order to grow. So when you pray again, or meditate, or open a sacred text, remember this teaching.
Don't look for magical signs outside. Listen to what is happening inside. There you will find the truest simanim, those that do not predict destiny, but do reveal the soul.
Now, when one thinks of spiritual signs, one usually imagines extraordinary phenomena, lights in the sky, mysterious voices, grandiose dreams. But Judaism, with its gentle irony and practical wisdom, surprises you by placing them on a plate of food. Yes, Rosh Hashanah, the most solemn day of the year, begins with a piece of date, a slice of beet, a small leek, a handful of fenugreek. And one might ask, really? Is the fate of the year really decided by a pumpkin? But of course, that's the trick. It's not the pumpkin, it's the symbol. The source is in the Talmud, in Horayot 12a and Keratot 6a. Abaye, that brilliant sage who loved details and subtleties, says, Simanah miltahi, signs matter, signs have weight. Therefore, he advises starting the year by eating certain foods whose Hebrew or Aramaic name allows for wordplay with positive supplications. Dates, pumpkin, beets, leeks, fenugreek. It's a combination of linguistic humor and spiritual depth, a theater of the soul, where language mixes with prayer. Take, for example, the dates. Tamar is associated with may our enemies be finished. Yitamu oivenu. The beet, selek, inspires may our adversaries be removed. Yistaleku. And so with each food, each one transformed into a yehi ratzon, a small plea to the Creator. May it be your will. The Shulchan Aruch, in Orach Kain 583, formalizes this custom, because the Talmud had already given us the green light. But the great halakhic masters clarify something essential. It's not food magic. It's not kitchen alchemy. The power is not in the date, but in the prayer that accompanies it. The simanim of Rosh Hashanah do not predict the future. They express our hope, our spiritual orientation towards a year of blessing. And Abaye understands this perfectly. At the beginning of the year, symbols do matter because they predispose you, they focus you, they awaken you. And if you want to see how this idea expands, just enter the Garden of Kabbalah. There, the simanim become almost astral maps, but legitimate, sacred ones, of correspondences between the physical and spiritual worlds. The Arizal, with his visionary genius, teaches that each fruit of Rosh Hashanah corresponds to a sephirah, a divine attribute or a spiritual channel. When you eat an apple dipped in honey, you're not just tasting sweetness, you're aligning your world with the orchard of sacred apples, the Hakal Tapuhin Kadishin of the Zohar. And yes, the image is as beautiful as it sounds, a celestial orchard whose fragrance descends to the physical world every Rosh Hashanah. For the Kabbalists, the siman is not a linguistic joke. It's a bridge, an interface between worlds, a physical act that awakens, itaruta delatata, a spiritual response. But, alas, that's precisely why they insist so much on kavanah. Without intention, the symbol is emptied of meaning. If you eat honey without seeking inner sweetness, you remain on the surface. And the surface, the sages say, is where superstition disguises itself as spirituality. And speaking of superstition, let me take you to a realm where Judaism plays a delicate dance with signs, the topic of nikush, forbidden divination. The Torah forbids it. Clearly, no interpreting trivial accidents as supernatural commands, no black cats or flying doves. And yet, the Midrashim sometimes show us characters reading signs in the stars. Pharaoh, for example, sees in his astrology a star called Ra'ah, which literally means evil, and interprets it as a siman of blood and destruction for Israel. So what's going on here? Are we or aren't we allowed to read signs? The rabbis respond with their classic elegance. One thing is superstition, and another is sacred symbolism. One thing is thinking that a falling glass predicts your day, and another is using a food item in a prayer ritual to express a supplication. One thing is treating signs as oracles, and quite another is treating them as pedagogical tools for the soul. That's why modern poskim, contemporary rabbis and thinkers emphasize, preserve the customs of the simanim, of course, But don't turn every coincidence into a message from heaven. Not every saman is a saman. Daily life is not a board of omens. And Judaism, with all its poetry, remains profoundly rational. This is where the Mishnah in Berakhot 5:5 masterfully connects with this whole universe. There, the term saman ra, bad omen, doesn't speak of the future. It speaks of the heart. It says that if you make a serious mistake in the Amidah, it's a sign that your kavanah, intention, is weakened. And if the one who makes the mistake is the Shaliach Tzibur, prayer leader, it's a sign that the entire community needs to review its spiritual state. The sign doesn't predict anything. It reveals something. It's an existential reading of the soul. And that's where Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa comes in, that tzaddik, righteous person, who lived in constant attunement with the divine. When he said, this one will live and this one will die, he wasn't predicting the future. He was reading the fluidity of his own prayer. Im shagura tefilati bafi, if my prayer flows in my mouth. For him, fluidity was a siman, not external, but internal, not magical, but mystical, an indicator of deep connection, not a prediction. In the end, when one puts all these pieces together, the Mishnah, Abaye, the Midrashim, the Halakha, the Kabbalah, a precious teaching emerges. Simanim are part of the spiritual language of Judaism. They are living metaphors, pedagogical tools, gestures that awaken intention, but always within an ethical and halakhic framework that avoids superstition and protects human freedom. The Rosh Hashanah simanim, symbolic foods, don't predict anything, they educate us. The simanim in prayer don't foretell the future, they reveal the quality of presence. The simanim of Kabbalah are not magic formulas, they are maps of intention. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson. In Judaism, signs never replace responsibility or conscience. They are reminders, triggers, seeds of introspection. So, when Rosh Hashanah arrives and you eat an apple with honey, remember, you are not engaging in mystical cooking. You are performing a symbolic act that unites your mouth, your memory, your desire, and your prayer in a single gesture. A small siman that doesn't predict your year, but can transform it. Because in the end, the most important signs don't come from heaven. They are born from the intention with which we look, we ask, we taste, and we present ourselves once again before the Creator. That's all for today's lesson. Until the next video.